All right, so this is a guided walkthrough for the Lyre machine that is hosted on hackmyvm.eu. The first thing we need to do for any of these challenges is we need to locate the machine on the network. So I have the machine started up. Let me demonstrate. It's running over here in this little window, and an extra bonus to the difficulty on this machine is that this is a Spanish version of Windows, so I might need to be translating from Spanish every once in a while. Anyways, I'm going to put this away, and then I'm going to try to locate the machine on my network. What we want to do is we want to use nmap to locate the machine on the network, and we need to figure out which network interface we're using. I think we're using the eth1 interface, so this is going to be the network over here. Let me copy that. We're going to scan this network range over here, and we're going to do what is called a ping sweep. So ping sweeping is basically trying to figure out which machines are up on a network, and we do that with this argument over here, -sn. It means that we're just going to send some ping packets and try to figure out if the machine is responding to them or not, or which machines on the network range respond. So it comes back pretty quickly. And we see that there is IP address 115 and 116 up. So another thing we need to do is we need to figure out what the IP address for our own machine is. So our interface is eth1, which means that our internet address, our IP address is 116. So aside from 116, there's 115 up. So we need to scan against this IP address. So let's copy that. And let's run our initial nmap scan. So whenever I do CTF challenges like this, these are the nmap arguments I like to use. So we do it very verbose. We do common scripts and versioning information on any services we find. We run it on 4 threads, which means it's very fast but not too fast. And we scan against every port, which is this argument here, -p-. So we're going to run it against the machine to try to figure out what ports on the target are open. So the reason why we run it very verbose is that when we run it very verbose, we're going to get output from the program before the scan finishes. This is very important. So we see here that we've got port 445, port 139, port 135, and port 80 open. So it's probably going to find some more ports open on the system. In particular, there are usually a bunch of ports on the 40,000 range that are open on Windows targets. Okay, so we see here that there's port 80 on the machine, and that means that there's a web page. That means that there is a web page that is associated with this machine. So we're going to visit the web page that's associated with this machine on the web browser. So on the web page, we access this web page on this IP address, and we get this message. It says, "Hey bro, you asked for an easy Windows VM. Enjoy it." So signed, Nika. So Nika, so this is actually very important information for us, because Nika is a potential username on the target. So we can take Nika's username and we can try to do some enumeration with this username. So we're just going to copy this, and we're going to keep in mind that this is an easy Windows VM, and what we're going to do is we're going to try to do some brute force attacks with the Nika username and try to determine their password. So when we hack against Windows targets, there's a certain program that we like to use, and the program is called Netexec. So the Netexec program is pretty much a one-stop shop for Windows hacking and enumeration. network pen testing. But there are some things that it can't do. But it used to be that we had to use a lot of different programs to hack against Windows machines. But Netexec has taken the place of a lot of them. So in this case, we're going to use Netexec to scan against the target, and I do believe it is 116. Is it 116 or 115? It's 115. And we're going to scan against the SMB service, which is ports 139 and 445, which we saw were open. We're going to try the Nico username, and we're going to try to brute force their password with all the passwords from the rocku.txt file. So the rocku.txt file is a list of 14 million passwords, and we're going to compare these 14 million passwords against the Nico user over here and try to figure out if they are using one of these passwords on this list. So it's a pretty common word list that we use when we're doing brute forcing. So when we use Netexec with the rocku.txt list, we need to give this particular argument here, ignore password decoding. Okay, so when we run this command, we're going to try to compare the Nico username, and we're going to try to determine their password by comparing it with all these passwords over here. So let's give the command. Oh, it's not Nico, it's Nika. Is it Nika? It is Nika. I spelled that incorrectly. Listen, everybody. If you don't spell something correctly, you do not get to hack. If you do not spell something correctly, you do not get to hack. Please keep that in mind. Okay, I've been giving the wrong username this entire time. Okay, so it's Nika, not Nico. Let's try that again. But for everybody at home, please spell everything correctly, because if you don't spell correctly, you can't hack. All right. But let's take a look at the brute force over here. So the brute force was also able to figure out that Nika's password was hardcore, because we did a brute force attack against Nika with the entire rocku.txt word list. 14 million passwords. Okay, let's move on. All right, Nika. It's Nika, and the password is hardcore. So let's check that the username is Nika and the password is hardcore. Okay, so we get this result over here. So the plus sign in Netexec means that this is correct. All right, so if we know that they have access via SMB, but we can actually check to see if they have access via any other service as well. So SMB is just one of the services we found. The other service that we found was the evil-winrm service. So we can give the same command, but we can change the protocol over here. So we're going to change this from SMB to evil-winrm, and we're going to use the same credentials, Nika and hardcore, to figure out if this user can access the system using evil-winrm. Okay, so we get this message over here. We do have access as Nika with the password hardcore. It says pwned over here. So the reason why it says pwned is because it's assumed that only administrator level users have access to evil-winrm, which means that if we're able to find a correct credential match, then we basically have administrator access to the system. In this case, that's not really true. So the nmap scan goes pretty slow. I'm not too sure why, but let's talk a little bit about the other ports that we found over here. So like I mentioned before, port 445 and 139 are associated with the SMB service. So it's these ports that we interact with when we do something like use Netexec to brute force against the SMB service over here. So port 80 is a web port, of course, and there are a bunch of ports that we find on the 40,000 range, like this one, and these other ones, and those are associated with the RPC service. And those are basically a bunch of ports that that do miscellaneous Windows services, and you're usually going to find quite a few of them on any open Windows target. The other significant find as far as open ports is this one right here, 5985. So this port is associated with the evil-winrm service, and that's basically a way for administrators to log into a system with the PowerShell terminal. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the winrm service. So the winrm service is a service we're going to be using to access the machine, and this is the winrm service, otherwise known as the Windows Remote Management Service. It's usually abbreviated to WinRM, and this service provides a PowerShell terminal access to a Windows server, and it is open on port 5985, if I remember correctly. WinRM access is usually limited to administrator-level users, but it's not guaranteed. Not every administrator-level user is going to have access to WinRM, and sometimes it's granted to non-administrators, which can be a little bit confusing. So the typical method of access for WinRM is through a PowerShell terminal, but Linux users can use the evil-winrm program to interact with the service. So now that we know that they have access via WinRM, we can log into the system with the evil-winrm program. So evil-winrm is basically a program that we can use to interface with the WinRM protocol, and we need to provide an IP address, we need to provide a username, and we need to use a password. So this might be a little bit advanced, but instead of a password, you can provide a password hash, and that's also going to get the job done. But in this case, we have a password, so we're going to supply the password. So when we run evil-winrm, it's going to log us in, and this is going to be a PowerShell prompt. So PowerShell, of course, is a special language that that Windows uses to do administration stuff. And we are now in. So I have to put on my scary hacker voice and say that we're in. Hold on. Put on voice changer. There we go.
Hey guys, it's me, Scary Hacker Voice Man. Scary Hacker Voice Man comes out whenever we break into a server, and we broke in. Well, Nika, you told us that you were going to give us an easy Windows VM. Well, it doesn't get easier than brute forcing the credentials with Netexec, now does it? Huh. Well, maybe you knew about these security flaws, or maybe you accepted the risk. Well, you accepted the risk. And now we're in.
Alright, so now we're in. Correct. Okay, great. So the first thing we need to do is we need to do a little bit of enumeration on the system. So to enumerate a Windows system, we usually want to figure out who are we and what privileges we have. So we can run the whoami/priv command on Windows to figure out what privileges a particular user has. So in this case, we have to translate from Spanish, because this is a Spanish version of Windows. But the names of the privileges don't change. It says we have SE change notify privilege and SE increase working set privilege. So these by themselves don't necessarily give us privilege escalation on the target. So what we need to do is we need to find some way to elevate our privileges on this particular server. Okay, so we need to figure out how to elevate our privileges on the system. So one thing we can do is we can try to figure out what other users exist on the system. We could use a command to do that. Of course, we can just go over to the C users directory and then take a look at what's in here. So we found a couple of other users on the system, In this case, in the home directory and the users directory, we've got our account, Nika, and we have the standard administrator account, but in this case it's Spanish. So it's not administrator, it's administrador. And there's this other user over here called Akanksha. We actually don't know. We didn't know about this user previously, so we can actually do some enumeration about the Akanksha user. One thing we can do is we can do this command, net user, and then the name of the user, Akanksha. Okay, so this is going to tell us all of the user information about this particular user on the system. I can't speak Spanish, but I do know that this is important information right here. So it says member of the group the local group member of this one over here. So this looks suspiciously like administrators. So if we have administrator access to the system, we basically own the system. So let's talk a little bit about this in our presentation. So we're talking about privilege escalation, brute force admin creds. So we were able to discover another user account on the system, and through brute force password attack, we determined their password. Let's see. So what we're going to do is we're going to brute force Akanksha's password as well. Now that we know that there is an Akanksha user on the system, we're going to try to brute force their password as well. So let's go ahead and do that. We know that the Akanksha user is an administrator, so if we're able to brute force their password, that means we're going to get administrator access to the system. But there are a couple of things that are getting in the way with that, but let's do this one step at a time. So we're going to go back to our Kali Linux terminal, where we were doing brute forcing, and this time, instead of the Nika user, we're going to brute force the Akanksha user. So let's just run this. So we're going to brute force again, and not too sure exactly how long this is going to take. Hopefully it doesn't take too long. Let me take a look at my notes. Okay, that didn't take too long. Alright, so we were able to use brute forcing to figure out the Akanksha user's password. So the password is sweetgirl. So what we're going to do is we're going to figure out what access the Akanksha user has. So the password is sweetgirl, and we need to figure out if they have SMB access. So this is just confirming that this is the correct password. So we do have SMB access as the Akanksha user on the server. The next thing we need to do is we need to figure out if they have WinRM access. Because if they have WinRM access, we've basically finished the box. So the problem here is that the Akanksha user does not have WinRM access, which means we can't just use evil-winrm to log in as Akanksha, but there are a couple of things we can do to get around this. So let's talk about it. So, like we said earlier, we're able to discover another user account on the system, and through brute force password attack, we determined what their password is. When we looked up that user's privileges on the system, we discovered that they're in the administrators group. So, if we can gain shell access as this user, we've effectively rooted the system. So this is where, because we don't have, this user doesn't have access to the WinRM service, we're going to instead use this program. So this is the RunAs program, because we do have shell access, but not as the Akanksha user, but as the Nika user. So if we are limited to CLI access, there are only certain types of user accounts that we can use for remote access. One workaround is to use the Windows RunAs command, which allows commands to be run on the system in the context of another user. So we can do RunAs and specify a user to run it as. It's going to ask us for the password of the user, and then we can run the program with the RunAs command. So I'm going to demonstrate this. We can't do clear or CLS? Oh, that's not great. Okay, so we're gonna try using the RunAs command, and let me take a look at the syntax. RunAs/user akanksha, and we're gonna try to run a shell which is cmd.exe. cmd.exe. So the problem here is that we don't get an opportunity to put in the password in this particular system when we run evil-winrm. So we can't use RunAs to become the akanksha user. So, but there is an alternative. So there are limitations to the RunAs command as well because it requires interactive password input, which is not always possible. So we just demonstrated that if we try to use RunAs on this system, it doesn't let us enter our password interactively. So as an alternative, we're going to use another program, which is called RunasCs, which was created with these kind of circumstances in mind. So when we run the RunasCs program, it's basically the same as running RunAs, except that we can supply the password in the command itself, so we don't have to worry about interactive password input over here. So let's download this program. So we're just going to go over to Google, and we're going to search up GitHub, and it's called RunasCs. Okay, so we're just going to go over to the GitHub page. Okay, we're back. All right, so we're at the Runas GitHub project page over here. And what we need to do is we need to grab a version of RunAs. So on the GitHub page, they've got this releases link over here, so we can go ahead and get that file. So this is a precompiled binary. We're going to grab the link, and then we're going to download the file. So on Kali Linux, we're just going to wget and download that file. That's going to download a zip file. So we see there's the zip file here. We're going to unzip it. And that's going to unzip two binaries here. So there's runascs.exe, and then there's the .NET version 2 version. So we're going to upload this file right here. So we're just going to copy the name. And then what we can do from our evil-winrm terminal here is we can upload files. So this is a feature of the evil-winrm program. It's very convenient. So what we need to do is just do this command right here. So it's upload, and then the name of the file. So it's automatically going to access files from the directory that it was started from. So we're just going to upload runascs.exe. Okay, upload successful. We see that upload successful. Am I not able to write to this directory? I think it didn't write because I'm not able to write to this directory here. So we need to move into another directory. I'm going to move into the Nika directory, and then I'm going to upload the file again. Okay, so the runascs binary is here. We've uploaded it, and we're going to run this to try to get a reverse shell as the akanksha user. So In order to do that, we first need to set up a reverse shell listener. So we're going to run RLWrap. This is something I've adapted pretty recently. So RLWrap is a program that we can run with Netcat in order to give Netcat some additional functionality. So we can do command history, and we can also move around inside of our terminal, and that's because of the RLWrap program. Anyways, let's start up our reverse shell listener. We're running it on port 443. And what we need to do to establish a reverse shell connection is we need a couple of different pieces of information. So we need the port number that our listener is on, so it's on 443. And another thing we need to do is we need to figure out our IP address. So we're using the ETH1 interface, and the IP address is this right here. So I'm just going to copy that. Then we're going to go over to our evil-winrm terminal, and we're going to run RunasCs over here. So it's just going to be //runascs.exe, and let me get my notes. Okay, so runascs.exe, and then the username, akanksha, and then the password, sweet girl. We're going to run cmd.exe, and we're going to do a reverse shell to this IP address on this port. This command is going to create a reverse shell as the Akanksha user, who's an administrator, and basically if we're able to catch this reverse shell, we've effectively pwned the system. Okay, so let's run the command. So it says running in session 0. Okay. Async process with PID 1492 created in background. Okay. Okay, so if we check over at our reverse shell listener, we see here that we now have a shell. So this is Windows System 32. Oh, this is, that's really big. CLS, clear. Okay, we can't run clear. That's fine. If we ask who am I, we're the Akanksha user, and if we do whoami priv, no, it's not whoami priv, it's net user. Net user Akanksha. We see that we're in the administrators group. So we've effectively rooted the system because we have access to an administrator account. Okay, so that means we have to do our root redeem.
What are you? I'm system root.
Okay, so we are now an administrator user on the system, which basically means we've rooted the system. If we move into C users administrator, administrator. Okay, we're able to enter this directory first of all, and then we have access to the root.txt file. So I don't like to reveal flags on these live streams, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do this. So we're going to type root.txt, and we're going to redirect the output from that into a file called iReadRoot.txt. Okay, and because we're able to do that, and because iReadRoot.txt and root.txt are the same size, I'm going to consider myself to have read the root.txt file. And reading the root.txt file is basically how you finish all of these CTF challenges. So there's going to be a user flag and a root flag. Because we're able to read the root flag, we've effectively finished the challenge. All right, so everybody, that was a guided walkthrough for the liar challenge from HackMyVM.eu. If you enjoyed this guided walkthrough, please click on the like and subscribe buttons on the video and leave a comment underneath the video But until next time, HackerFrogs out!
Hey there, HackerFrogs! Are you enjoying this workshop? Learning new concepts and skills? If so, there's a way you can support the channel, and it's totally free. Just click on the subscribe button below the video. Also, click on the like button. And if you have questions or comments on this workshop, please leave them below the video. Thanks for listening. And now, back to our scheduled programming.